Hello and welcome back to Cows Week. It's Monday, that means it's day 3. And what a different day Monday turned out to be. For a start, it was chucking it down with rain, torrential rain in the morning, which worried most of us as to whether we were going to be facing this for the rest of the day. Fortunately, we weren't. But it was a day with a difference. One of the key differences was the number of downwind starts, especially for the white group classes. All of the white group classes were starting on the Squadron line today. The forecasted breeze was for it to be pretty light, around sort of 8 knots, maybe 10 knots in the morning, and then dropping off. And some of the forecasts suggest it would drop off completely. Anyway, again, it didn't. But it was those downwind starts with the tide that made for such a different day when it came to watching the starts off the Squadron. Not everybody got it right, but surprisingly, not that many people got swept over the line and got OCS, which I was quite surprised at. Now, first up in the white group classes to head off for the day was the J70 class, one of the biggest fleets here at Cows Week, and also an incredibly competitive fleet. But it was interesting to see them heading off on a downwind start because, of course, the J70 was designed primarily for windward leeward racing, where the first leg is upwind, and that none of them would have had an awful lot of practice at starting downwind with the tide. And it made for quite an exciting first mark rounding when they came barrelling in with a couple of knots of tide underneath them, then having to jibe and then go into a tight reach right the way across the Solent. It was exciting to watch. I'm sure it was pretty exciting on board because, as I say, these are things you don't normally do in sports boat racing. The same was true for the SB20s, who came in just behind them and also had to go round the first turning mark at East Bay just off Gurnard and then head north across the Solent. For the classes that followed them after that, those that had spinnakers were symmetric kites, and their course was slightly different. They ended up with a downwind leg with the tide, but again, this downwind start, and judging that timing on the line was absolutely critical. Those that got it right and actually got into the breeze stole a march on the rest of the fleet. But as you might expect, even though there were plenty of curveballs thrown across the course, there were some familiar names at the top of each of the results lists for each of the classes. Among those was Rupert Mander and his crew in the Flying 15 class. They won today's race. Giles Peckham scored another win in the Daring class. So, whilst all the white group boats headed off down to the west, the IRC classes headed up towards the northeast and went up for a committee boat start. And they did most of their racing in the eastern Solent out there. And funny enough, theirs was more windward leeward style racing. Now, yesterday I talked a little bit after racing about one of the boats that caught my eye, Oystercatcher 35, which she was out for the first time today, racing in IRC Class 0. She's about the same length as Gladiator, the TP52, owned by Tony Langley, but she couldn't quite catch her today, and I've got a feeling she needs to beat her on the water as well. So a bit of work in progress there, but good to see her out on the water. In the Fast 40 Plus class, it was Rahn who had won the previous day's racing and won again today. And the other class that has caught my eye once again, it has done every day so far, is the Cape 31s. They're having some fantastically close racing, particularly at the finish of the race. Having been out for several hours, actually some of the results came right down to the closing meters towards the line. So with all the white group classes going to the east, this variety of boats here, everything from the Red Wings and the Sonars and the XODs and the Victories and the Seaview Mermaids and so on, and the IRCs going to the east, when they came to finish, they were finishing against each other, but the other way around to normal. Normally we see the IRC classes coming from the west. Anyway, topsy-turvy day today, where things weren't quite as you might normally expect. But that's Cows Week for you. That's what makes it fun, having to just adapt to the conditions as they are. So what we lacked in breeze was certainly made up for in some of the complexity on the racecourse. Now, whilst Cows Week is known for the glitz and the glamour and some of the big impressive Grand Prix boats, it's also for many people about this. about lots of one design racing and handicap racing, and it's just the variety of classes. And up here at Shepherd's Marina, just a little bit further up the river, you get a real taste of that. Behind me, the J70s, one of the biggest fleets here at Cowswick. FAR 280 here, alongside a classic Swan. Just behind the classic Swan is Giovanni Belgrano's Laurent Giles design Whooper. I think she was built in the late 50s, early 60s, and a very successful boat. Now, aside from the racing out there, part of what Cowswick's all about is the socialising, and there are some views that just simply haven't changed. Mooring 4 or 5 abreast out from the pontoon is one of those. It's great fun. You get to chill out with a few beers, tie up alongside some of your competitors, chew the fat, hand out your excuses, tell them you're going to beat them tomorrow, and just generally have a bit of a laugh. I did my first Cowswick, I think it was 1975, as a teenager, and this is what I remember about the event. Just hanging out, chilling, enjoying myself, just like them. You never forget it. I think it's one of the things that really makes this event so special.